Since Hitler's death, a possible rescue rests solely on my reaction. If I do nothing, it's as if I'm causing his death even more than yourselves. Wouldn't you agree?
The first time you see Christoph Waltz on screen, something clicks. There's this immediate sense that you're watching someone who knows exactly what they're doing. Someone with complete control over every gesture, every pause, every subtle shift in tone. And then comes the question that probably crossed your mind too. Where has this guy been? Because Waltz didn't just appear out of nowhere. He'd been working for 3 decades before most people even learned his name. 30 years of acting, of honing his craft, of sharpening that particular kind of on-screen magnetism that makes you unable to look away. And yet, for all that time, he remained essentially invisible to the industry that would eventually celebrate him. It's not like he was sitting around waiting for opportunity to knock. Waltz had plenty of work in German television and theater, steady roles that paid the bills and kept him employed. But here's the thing about steady work. It can be satisfying on a personal level while being completely frustrating on an artistic one. He was typecast, stuck playing one-dimensional characters that never really tested his range or let him show what he was actually capable of. The roles were fine, professionally adequate, but there's a ceiling to what you can do within the confines of regional television, especially when most of it isn't particularly inspired. You reach a certain limit in terms of what you can sink your teeth into, and after that, it becomes tough. That was Waltz's reality for most of his career, capable of so much more, but without the platform or opportunity to prove it. Then came 2009, and everything changed with one role. Quentin Tarantino had written Hans Landa for Inglourious Basterds, and he was terrified. Not because the script was bad, but because he genuinely thought he'd created something unplayable. Landa needed to be charming and terrifying in equal measure, someone who could make you feel comfortable and deeply unsafe at the same time. Tarantino later admitted he was ready to scrap the entire film if he couldn't find the right actor. And then Waltz walked into the audition. The producers sat there, jaws practically on the floor, unable to believe what they were witnessing. Waltz embodied every complexity Tarantino had written into the character. The intelligence, the menace, the disarming politeness that somehow made everything worse. When he left the room, thanking Tarantino humbly for the opportunity, they had to stop him and say, "No, thank you." What makes Landa so unsettling is that he doesn't operate like a typical movie villain. There's no cartoonish evil, no transparent brutality. Instead, he wraps everything in layers of civility and professionalism. He greets you with a warm smile, offers compliments, maintains impeccable manners, all while executing absolutely heinous acts. That restaurant scene with Shosanna is a masterclass in suspense. Landa sitting there making small talk, savoring his strudel, taking his sweet time because he holds all the power, and he knows it. You can't tell whether he recognizes her as the girl who escaped from the farmhouse. Waltz's performance keeps both Shosanna and the audience completely in the dark. The pacing is measured, the delivery polite, but underneath it all runs this current of potential violence that could surface at any moment. That's the genius of it. The ambiguity, the unpredictability. You never feel safe with Landa on screen, even when he's being perfectly pleasant. And here's what makes the character even more interesting. Landa isn't driven by ideology. He's not a true believer in the Nazi cause. He simply sees the war as a vehicle for advancing his own career. That moral flexibility makes him dangerous to everyone, enemy and ally alike. By the end of the film, he's negotiating his own surrender in exchange for immunity, willing to betray everyone if it serves his interests. This kind of moral ambiguity became Waltz's signature. Look at Dr. King Schultz in Django Unchained. At first glance, he seems like a straightforward hero figure, principled and driven by a moral compass. But dig a little deeper and you realize most of his actions are rooted in self-interest. His partnership with Django isn't about abolitionist principles, it's about necessity. He needs Django to identify the Brittle brothers so he can collect a bounty. Freeing Django from slavery is an act of kindness, sure, but it's entirely transactional. Schultz operates in morally gray areas. He frames bounty hunting as lawful justice, but at its core, it's killing for profit. The state puts a price on someone's head, he tracks them down, and he collects. Despite the civilized veneer, there's an emotional detachment to the violence that makes you question how heroic this character actually is. The cracks really show during the confrontation with Calvin Candy. Schultz, usually composed and calculating, loses control when Candy forces him to shake hands as part of their deal. His refusal reveals genuine disdain for the slave trade, but it also exposes his selfishness. Rather than prioritizing Django's safety or Broomhilda's freedom, he compulsively shoots Candy, putting everyone's life at risk. It's a moment of principle that's also catastrophically self-indulgent. What's fascinating is how Waltz carries this same intellectual intensity into his off-screen persona. Interviews with him feel less like promotional appearances and more like verbal chess matches. He has this uncanny ability to command attention without ever raising his voice, answering questions with a deliberate precision and a preference for engaging interviewers on his own terms rather than playing along with standard celebrity dynamics. There's a dry humor to everything he does, a particularly Austrian sense of irony that he describes as being very polite while not meaning it at all. And beneath it all runs a thread of genuine humility. When asked what percentage of his career success he attributed to luck, he was ready to argue until he stopped himself and admitted 100%. He's consistently reluctant to take credit, preferring to redirect praise toward his collaborators, especially Tarantino. But here's the thing about that humility. It's not false modesty. Waltz understands that his characters wouldn't exist without the specific circumstances that created them. Tarantino wrote roles that perfectly matched what Waltz had been developing for 30 years. Without that meeting, without that specific audition, King Schultz would never have existed. The character is inseparable from the actor who brought him to life, and that's really the key to understanding Waltz's late career breakthrough. These performances aren't manufactured. They're the product of decades of creative effort, of longing for something more challenging and intellectually fulfilling, of refusing to oversimplify even when the material didn't demand complexity. All that preparation was happening during those frustrating years in German television, during those typecast roles that felt like hitting a creative ceiling. When the opportunity finally arrived, Waltz didn't just seize it. He was uniquely prepared for it in a way that wouldn't have been possible earlier in his career. The charm, the menace, the intellectual depth, the ability to make moral ambiguity feel real rather than contrived, all of that required time to develop. Breaking into Hollywood at 53 isn't a typical success story, but in Waltz's case, the timing was actually perfect. Think about what that means for how we understand career trajectories in entertainment. Hollywood tends to favor a specific path: early discovery, rapid ascent, youth as an asset. Waltz's story runs completely counter to that model. He spent 3 decades being essentially invisible to the mainstream industry, working steadily but without recognition, accumulating skills and depth that the regional market couldn't fully utilize. And then the right role came along at exactly the moment when he could fully embody it. Would a younger Waltz have brought the same weight to Hans Landa with him? Could he have captured that particular combination of charm and menace without decades of experience to draw from? Probably not. Some performances require a lifetime of preparation, even if that lifetime includes long stretches of frustration and obscurity. There's something both inspiring and sobering about that. Inspiring because it proves that persistence and craft development eventually pay off, that decades of work aren't wasted even when they feel like dead ends. Sobering because it raises questions about how many talented people never get that breakthrough moment. How many Christoph Waltzes are out there still waiting for someone to write their Hans Landa? The entertainment industry isn't designed to surface unconventional talent. It doesn't naturally reward people who take the long road, who develop their skills outside the mainstream spotlight, who don't fit the standard age brackets or career timelines. Waltz's success required not just his own preparation, but also a filmmaker willing to take a chance on an unknown German actor for one of the most crucial roles in his film. That's the real lesson here. Talent matters, preparation matters, but opportunity matters just as much. And sometimes opportunity takes 30 years to arrive. When it does, you'd better be ready to deliver a performance so undeniable that the entire industry has to acknowledge what they've been missing all along. Waltz managed exactly that. He created 2 of the most memorable characters in modern cinema, won 2 Academy Awards, and completely redefined what a late career breakthrough could look like. Not bad for someone the industry ignored for 3 decades. So, if you've ever felt like you're working in obscurity, like your skills aren't being recognized, like the industry isn't paying attention, well, there's something oddly comforting about knowing that Christoph Waltz felt the exact same way for 30 years. The difference is, he kept working anyway, kept developing his craft, kept preparing for an opportunity he couldn't be sure would ever arrive. And when it finally did, he was ready. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this deep dive into Christoph Waltz's unconventional path to success, hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments what other career stories you'd like me to cover. There are plenty more fascinating journeys out there, and I'm just getting started.